After a drunken night of passion, I ended up with a bun in the oven. The kid's dad is Frank, a mafia boss. I was forced into a quickie marriage with him, only to find out the pregnancy was a false alarm. Frank hates being deceived, and the thought of his wrath made me shiver. I quickly packed my bags to flee, but Frank brought his men and surrounded the airport overnight. His expression was pitiful, and his voice was full of grievance. "Are you and the baby abandoning me?" The air was filled with the heady aroma of booze, and under the dim lights, the sounds of music and clinking glasses were buzzing. I was tucked away in a booth, downing drink after drink. My ex-boyfriend Charles came huffing towards me. Seeing me look all miserable, he cockily raised his chin. "Grace, you just can't get over me, can you?" Even with my mind all foggy, I could still recognize this guy in front of me. "Cheater, stop flattering yourself. You're disgusting." Charles was all smug. "I know you're just mad. Come on, don't be like that. Let's go home." I threw my drink at him. "Cheater, get lost." The whole place turned to look because of the commotion. Charles got mad. "Grace, you just don't appreciate kindness." He grabbed my wrist and tried to drag me out. "Let go of me. Don't touch me. It's gross. Help, he's trying to abduct me. Someone call the cops." Charles told the crowd, "She's just my girlfriend throwing a tantrum. Y'all carry on, don't mind us." I was pounding on his arm. "Get off, dirtbag. Let go of her," a lazy, roguish voice interrupted Charles. A guy was leaning against the staircase, smoking, looking all casual. "This is none of your business," Charles said angrily. "Dealing with my girlfriend, you want to stick your nose in?" The guy sauntered forward, sneering. He yanked me away from Charles and punched him hard in the face, followed by a kick to the gut with full force. Charles collapsed, beaten. A crew of men in black rushed over and carried Charles away effortlessly. I was left stumbling. "Serves him right." One of the man's henchmen spoke up, "Messing with the boss, you needed a lesson." The alcohol really started to hit me. By boss, they mean like, mob boss? My legs were wobbly. Then an arm grabbed my waist firmly. "Careful." Then he let go quickly. I looked up. It was the guy who helped me earlier. His dark hair fell messily across his forehead. He had sharp features and a handsome face, with broad shoulders and a slim waist in black pants. I felt even more intoxicated, staring at him, all starry-eyed. "Hottie, seeing you makes me hungry." When people are drunk, their subconscious really goes wild, making them reckless. Before Frank could react and push me away, I stood on my tiptoes and kissed him on his thin lips. There was a scent of orange blossoms. I loved it. Frank blinked, looking down at me. Before he could push me away, I bit his lip hard enough to draw blood. Blood on his lip made him look even more intense. I liked it. Frank took a startled step back, his face flushed. Filled with disbelief, "I saved you, and you assaulted me?" I ignored him, climbed onto his back, and wrapped my arms around his neck. I patted his firm butt. "Let's go home." Frank broke out in a sweat, warning me with a restrained look, "Get down, or else." "Or else what?" I said, teasing. "Everyone can talk big. Just surrender already, young man. You're mine now. Isn't pleasing a woman what you're supposed to do?" I kissed the corner of his mouth. "Hurry home, I'm sleepy." A few of his henchmen tried to get me off Frank, but a stern look from him stopped them. Frank shook me, but I clung to him, my legs wrapped around his waist. I rested my chin on his shoulder, all cozy on his back. "The night is young, hurry up. Surprises always hit you out of nowhere." I was sitting on the toilet, staring at the pregnancy test's 2 lines for what felt like forever before I cursed, "Shit. What the hell are the odds? One night, and I hit jackpot? Wait, was it only once? That night was, like, 3 or 4 times? I couldn't remember. Just recall waking up next to a guy with suspicious marks on me. More disturbing was me being the one forcing him, pinning him down, kissing, and touching him, while he resisted with an intensely dark expression. Wouldn't a mob boss be the kind to feed me to the fishes for this? I eventually dashed out of the hotel at lightning speed. I got so busy afterward that I forgot to take the morning after pill. Never thought I'd get pregnant this easily. It was just a drunken night with a stranger. Come on, don't punish me with a baby. Sitting in the office, my mind was solely on whether to keep the baby or not. By timing, it's less than a month now, with the best time for abortion at 6-8 weeks. I've got over a couple of weeks to mull it over. Mary came over, waving her hand in front of my face. Grace, stop spacing out. Pack up, we've landed a big client. We're about to hit the jackpot. Mary, 2 grades above me, is a senior from college, and we started a small advertising firm after I graduated. We barely scraped by with a few hires, no major accounts. They say when love sucks, your career thrives. I perked up immediately, ready to ditch the jerk and focus on my career. Mary, I'm packing right now. When we got to the office, the client was buried in work. The secretary apologized. The CEO is busy, please wait a while. Seeing his focused side profile triggered a hint of recognition, but just that, a bit familiar. Once he finished his work, he lifted his head and introduced himself. I'm Frank. His voice was just as lazy and roguish as before. I suddenly remembered, the big boss, the guy I had a fling with. The father of the baby in my belly. I felt uneasy. I heard he really hates women. Would he even remember me? Would he throw me into the ocean to feed the fish? Lost in thought, I was caught off guard when Frank called me over. Mary, who's this beside you? This is another partner of our company, Grace. Don't let her young age fool you, Frank. She's very talented and has won several prestigious awards both domestically and internationally. Frank chuckled. MS. Grace looks really familiar. Have we met somewhere? One thought ran through my mind, can't admit it. I lowered my head and chuckled awkwardly. Maybe it's because I have a common face, that's why I seem familiar to Frank. I heard Frank's low laugh. MS. Grace does have a common face. Even though Frank's words were sharp, he was straightforward. He offered a price 10% higher than market value and signed the contract on the spot. His dark eyes landed on me, the only requirement. MS. Grace must personally handle all liaison with the company. As dusk settled in, the evening sun broke through the clouds, painting the entire sky red. Walking out of the company, I saw Charles pacing in front of the door. I didn't want to argue with him, so I turned to leave. But Charles spotted me first. He grabbed me hard. Grace, give me another chance. Just listen to me. You're the woman I've always loved. The mild evening breeze carried the smell of smoke from Charles, and it sickened me. I doubled over, retching on the street. Charles reached out to comfort me, but an unexpected force knocked him down. Frank's punches came fast. He even landed a few on Charles's face. Charles lay half dead on the ground, face swollen like a pig's head. Frank waved vaguely at Charles while speaking to someone behind him. Take him to the police. Let them handle him for causing a disturbance. Then he turned to me, gently patting my back. What's wrong? Why are you throwing up so badly? Over time, Frank and I had gotten used to each other, so I wasn't afraid of him. I looked up at him, hand on my chest, speaking with accusation. It's your fault. I don't want to see you right now. Stay away from me. What nonsense are you spouting? I just helped you. Can't you be grateful for once? Well, the kid in my belly is yours, right? Who else should I blame? Isn't helping me the right thing to do? Did I ask you to help? No, right? So why does that matter to me? Frank pursed his lips, his dark eyes looking at me with a faint gaze. Fine, Grace. You're something else. From now on, if I meddle in your business again, I interrupted. I'm a dog. His expression softened a lot. Good you know it. The next second, I was puking again. pointed at my back. Frank patted me lightly. Why are you throwing up like this? He helped me toward the hospital, insisting on knowing what was wrong. But I glanced at him. Don't get the wrong idea. I just don't want my investment to go to waste. I pushed his hand away, slowly heading to the parking lot. No need for the hospital. I'm healthy. Obviously, going to the hospital with Frank would reveal the pregnancy. I couldn't allow that. Frank followed closely. Let me drive you home. I raised an eyebrow, glancing back at him. Didn't you say you'd be a dog if you meddled again? What now? Frank stiffened, silent for a while. Then, turning away, he barked, woof, woof. I burst into laughter. The cramped car filled with the scent of orange blossoms. In the passenger seat, I tilted my head to look out the window. I saw you throwing up pretty hard. You really don't want to go to the hospital? Shaking my head, no need. I have medicine at home. Changing topics, does Charles always bother you like this? I was a bit puzzled about why Frank would ask. Not always. I blocked him, so he showed up instead. Why block him? You two seemed close in college. I shrugged. He cheated. About a month ago, with some rich girl. He found someone better than me, I guess. Blind back then, but a guy like him? Wouldn't take him even if given for free. Frank turned, a hint of a smile on his lips. Be more careful in the future. Charles cheated a year ago, not just recently. A year ago? That would be right after graduation. I scoffed. Charles had some nerve. Something clicked, and my voice rose a bit. How do you know he cheated a year ago? How do you know we went to college together? You've been looking into me? He nodded casually, just getting to know my partner. Nothing to get worked up about. Watching his nonchalant attitude, I laughed in frustration. What about this? Did you know your partner's pregnant? Frank's smile froze, his gaze turning sharp and icy, eyebrows cutting. A chill ran through me. Why provoke Frank? A mad Frank was dangerous. Teeth gritted, he asked, who's the father? I snapped back, who else but you? Over time, Frank had figured out who I was. No point in hiding it anymore. Fingers curling slightly, his face showed surprise. What do you mean? You don't remember if we used protection that night? A whirlwind of emotions crossed Frank's face. Finally, he seemed to decide something. What do you want to do? I hesitantly asked, what do you think? This child involved him, so I was curious about his thoughts. After a few seconds, he pulled out a black card, offering it to me. I respect your choice. If you want to have it, I'll take responsibility. If not, your choice matters to me. Early in the morning, I walked out of the neighborhood, basking in the sunrise, and spotted a flashy pink Maserati parked at the entrance from a distance. Frank got out of the car. He was wearing a white hoodie, black sweatpants paired with sneakers, and had a clean, fresh haircut. He looked neat and bright. He walked up to me briskly with a look of disdain. What kind of outfit is that? It doesn't match at all. You still have some time, go change into something that matches me. I stared at him in confusion, wearing a typical workplace outfit of a knitted sweater and high-waisted wide-leg pants. He waved the household registration book in his hand. We're going to get our marriage license. My pupils dilated in shock, not believing what I heard, and after a few seconds, I asked, Frank, what are you talking about? Have you lost your mind? Don't overthink it, I just want to give the kid a family, you know? People like us often face pressure to get married and have kids. I nodded mechanically. Frank was 28, so it wasn't surprising that his family was pushing him to get married. But if he wanted to get married, many women would surely flock to him. Why me? Is it just because I'm pregnant? I'm not marrying you because I like you, so don't get the wrong idea. It's just because being with you can solve a lot of the problems I'm facing right now. It can get them off my back. I blinked. I don't like you either. There's no need to keep saying you don't like me. it's like you're trying too hard to convince yourself. A few years ago, a doctor mentioned that with my thin uterine walls, it would be difficult to get pregnant again. If I aborted the baby, I might not have another chance. So I decided to have the baby, regardless of whether Frank wanted to take care of it. In the end, I put on a white shirt paired with jeans and walked with him to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Even though Frank and I were purely a marriage of convenience, he needed a wife, and I wanted a father for the baby. We looked well matched on the marriage certificate, like a truly enviable couple. It took me a long time in the car to process that I had just gotten married to Frank, a man I had only known for a month. Frank hummed a tune while driving, looking like he was in a great mood. Of course, he should be happy. The pressure to marry and have children was finally off. Something occurred to me, and I looked at him seriously. Frank, do your parents know about the marriage? In wealthy families, marriages are often more important than life itself, and I come from an ordinary family, far below their standards. I told them. They even gave me the household registration book. So, they're okay with it? Of course, they're thrilled. Seeing the concern on my face, Frank chuckled softly. Are you already worried about in-law issues? I was probably worrying too much. They don't care about family background, and they're letting me make all the decisions. Besides, they like you a lot. Think about what you need to pack. I looked at him puzzled. Pack what? I wasn't planning on living separately. Of course, we'll live together. You know what, don't bother packing, we'll just buy whatever you need. I couldn't argue with Frank, so I moved into his place that night. I wanted to sleep in a separate room, but Frank wouldn't let me. You're pregnant. It's too hard to be by yourself. If you stay with me, I can take care of you. Don't overthink it, I'm just here to help. I lay stiffly on the bed while the sound of running water echoed from the bathroom. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to force myself to sleep. The water stopped, and I heard the bathroom door open. Frank walked towards the bed. My body tensed, and I dared not move. Already asleep? He said, then lay on the other side of the bed. He moved closer, peering at me. You sleep so well? After a moment of silence, I cautiously opened one eye to sneak a peek. Just then, I caught his smiling gaze. Gotcha, pretending to sleep, huh? I awkwardly turned away. No, of course not. You staring at me woke me up. He chuckled. Now you're blaming me? He leaned in a bit, forcing me to look at him. His hair was still damp, his upper body bare, showing a lean, muscular frame and neatly arranged abs, with a loosely tied towel around his waist. Fresh out of a bath, he seemed less arrogant and more gentle. My heartbeat raced, and I was clearly blushing. But with Frank watching me, I couldn't back down, so I boldly stared back at his exposed skin. Then, I reached out and touched him, commenting, nice feel. The confident man turned shy in an instant, his ears turning red, hurriedly looking away. What are you doing, touching me like that? I boasted. You're showing it, so you're letting me touch it, right? Besides, I'm just touching my husband. He was momentarily taken aback. What did you just call me? Embarrassed by his straightforwardness, I awkwardly shifted the topic. I'm really tired, I need to sleep. He chuckled softly. You'll have to call me that eventually, so I'll let you off the hook for now. Seeing me keep my eyes shut, he quickly added, don't sleep yet, I have something to tell you. Do you remember anything from that night? The scent of oranges, soft red lips, a comforting back, a man's breathing. My last memory was of Frank taking me out of the bar. I denied. I don't remember anything. Frank covered himself with the blanket, his ears still a bit red but now with an authoritative air. I'll tell you once, so remember. You were the one who got handsy with me, hugging and holding me. I couldn't resist you, and you pinned me down, touching me everywhere. My face flushed crimson, my words stumbling. I didn't do that. Though I was unsure, knowing that when drunk, I sometimes did outrageous things. Could it be that I took advantage of him? Frank moved as if to demonstrate. Want me to help you remember? I pulled the blanket over my head. No, I'm going to sleep. The baby says he's tired. Since I got pregnant, Frank hired a driver to take me to and from work. Sometimes when he was free, he'd pick me up himself. He also hired a new nutritionist to plan my meals. That day after work, I unexpectedly found Frank at home, resting. He's lounging lazily on the couch in his brown loungewear, flipping through the book in his hand while wearing those gold-rimmed glasses. As I approach, I first notice the books beside him, all sorts related to pregnancy and kids. Oh gosh, what a mess of books. I awkwardly clear my throat. Have you eaten? He snaps the book shut and tosses it aside, visibly tense. When did you get home? Just now. He's looking everywhere except at me. The assistant bought the books. I was just curious and took a quick look. I nod to show I believe him. You seemed so engrossed you didn't even hear me come in. Holding my belly, I sit beside him. Do you like kids that much? Want to feel? What do you mean? I point to my belly. I think you can feel it now. Want to try? Frank's eyes flash with a mix of emotions. Will he like me? He will. You're his dad, he'll definitely like you. Frank is smiling, but somehow it feels like he's convincing himself of something he doesn't believe. I'm his dad, he'll like me, and I'll like him a lot too. Frank has always seemed conflicted. When he found out I was pregnant, he wasn't happy at all, but we got the marriage certificate the next day to give the baby a family. He never expressed excitement or fondness for the baby, yet secretly reads parenting books and coordinates with a nutritionist for me. I once saw his cart full of children's items. His palm gently cups my belly, fingers bent softly, clean nails. Can he feel it? Moving cautiously. I think he can. What a wonder, there's really a little life in there. Frank, do you not like kids? Or maybe not him? Softly, he replies, you're the mother, I like him. And I'm grateful too. Grateful he brought you to me. I swirl the water glass in my hand, bored, staring at the dancing crowd in the bar. Alice's footsteps approach. Just went to the bathroom, why are you back so late? My best friend hesitates. Grace, is your husband at home now? What's up? I came out with Alice to explain my marriage today, but she's never asked me anything weird. I saw someone who looks like your husband, in a private room. 10 minutes ago, Alice just saw Frank's photo, praised him as stunningly handsome, so it shouldn't be a mistake. Yeah, that's Frank. This bar is one of his businesses, it's normal for him to be here. Why make a fuss? She starts to say something else, never mind, just come with me and have a look. The private room door is ajar, we stand in the hallway, easily peeking inside. In the bustling crowd, I spot Frank immediately, he's quite striking. Long legs tucked in, suit jacket open, lightly biting a cigarette, flicking a lighter in hand, flickering. There's a sudden thud, someone kneels, actions pleading with fear. The room goes silent. Frank, holding the cigarette, none of your business, keep at it. He walks leisurely over to the man on the floor, speaking with a smile, then suddenly presses the cigarette into the man's face. Then lifts a bottle in his left hand, smashing it onto the man's head, bottle shattering, blood trickling down, staining the expensive carpet red. Frank talks with a smile but his actions are swift and ruthless. Foot clad in fine shoes presses onto the man's back, cracking sounds echo as bones snap. The man kneels, murmuring thanks for sparing his life. Too far to hear Frank's words, but the gossiping voices come through. Frank still hasn't let go of Coco, always goes off when it involves her. This guy messed with Coco, and Frank's lenient to not have killed him. Good thing Coco's back in the country, Frank can stop pining now. Probably won't be long before we call her sister-in-law. Hearing them made my face go pale. Now I realize Frank has never been someone you mess with, the crime boss thing isn't just a label. Blood, violence, brutality. The kindness, gentleness, innocence in front of me has always been his facade. In this love-lacking marriage, I've developed feelings I shouldn't have. I thought he at least liked me a bit, believed proximity would lead to love eventually. But he's an unattainable figure, controlling the relationship's dynamic. Maybe the moment the child is born is when I lose all value. What will happen to me then? What chance do I stand? Mind spinning like tangled yarn, hands shaking more. I tug Alice away, shaking my head at her. Alice, today never happened. Before I sort things out with Frank. A sudden shock came, or maybe it's good news. Doctor, you're saying I'm not pregnant? That can't be. The test showed positive and I have morning sickness. My voice dwindles. Could the results be wrong? The doctor gives me a blank look. You've doubted the hospital but not the test. Tests aren't 100% accurate. As for morning sickness, maybe you just ate too much. Touching my belly, thinking about when I had Frank feel the baby's presence. Why did he say the baby was kicking him? Was it all in our heads? Just left the hospital when Frank called. How'd the appointment go? Everything okay? I hesitate, the baby's healthy. All's well. Sorry, I couldn't join you for it, had an urgent business trip. Next time for sure. I hum, not saying more. The air went silent for a few minutes, and then I heard a voice. What happened? Is everything okay? A moment later, I asked softly, Frank, if I wasn't pregnant, would you still be with me? I didn't have the courage to speak the truth and quickly changed the subject. When will you be back? I heard a few light laughs through the phone. Do you miss me, or does the baby miss me? If it's the baby, well, just let them know I'll be back soon. If it's not, well, tell the person missing me to hang in there a bit longer. After hanging up, I couldn't snap out of it for a while. When I finally calmed down, I started thinking about everything that had happened recently. Because of the baby, Frank and I got married, but now it turns out to be a mistake. And his first love is back. I've fallen for Frank, but the only connection between us is this child. Now that connection's gone. We're married in name only, with no real foundation, and Frank and I are headed for an end. I should step back while I still can, before I'm in too deep. I can divorce Frank and let his first love take her rightful place. Not really let, since it was hers all along. I remember hearing the gossip that Frank hates being lied to. If I tell him the truth to his face, will he think I'm just some gold digger, trying to marry him for his status? Would he get so mad he'd throw me into the ocean to feed the fish? I've already lost my heart, I can't lose my life too. So I decided to lay low abroad for a while. The autumn night was already cold and windy. I could still feel the biting chill even while sitting in the departure hall wearing a coat. The announcement came, attention passengers on Flight 756 to New York. We regret to inform you that due to weather conditions, the flight is delayed. Please wait in the departure hall for further notice. Flight 756. My flight. I was filled with dread. Every minute the plane was delayed was another minute Frank might find me. I made my way to the ticket counter with my luggage, only to be told the next flight out is in 5 hours. 5 hours? I was pacing, clutching my phone with countless missed calls and messages from Frank. I was too scared to pick up. While I was lost in thought, a shadow loomed over me. A man's voice trembled. Why are you leaving? Why the divorce? Tall figure in a black coat, breathing heavily, like he'd run all the way here. I stepped back, scanning the area. Other passengers had disappeared. Behind me were men in black, brought by Frank. A few cars parked in the distance. In seconds, I imagined various ways I might die. Frank must have plenty of ways to torture someone. I was trembling, my voice wavering as I spoke, almost crying. Could you at least leave my body intact? He paused, not responding. If you can't do that, can you at least make it quick? Frank laughed, a sarcastic laugh. Grace, this is a law-abiding society. What on earth are you thinking? I couldn't possibly want to hurt you. I like you and the baby so much. Are you both going to leave me? In a rash decision, I spoke the truth. I'm not pregnant. It was all a misunderstanding. I left him the divorce agreement. I planned to tell him the reason once I was safely out of the country. Frank's look seemed pitiful, his eyes red, speaking with a quiver. If it's just about wanting a kid, that's no issue. We can have one later and be a happy family of 3. I was in disbelief. Frank, what are you saying? Doesn't he have a first love? Why say such ambiguous things to me? If you want kids, I can have them too. Technology today is amazing. I'll have one eventually. My brain froze for a second. Was he suggesting not to kill me, that he wanted to stay together? A bit slow to catch on, I asked, "You're not going to kill me?" How could I bring myself to do that? Besides, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've never hurt anyone. I didn't end up leaving after all. Before I could have an open conversation with Frank, I got a message from Charles. I had already blocked his number, but he found Alice to relay he needed to talk. Reaching the cafe corner, Charles was already waiting. I was in no mood to be polite. "What do you want?" He had a sly grin. "I heard you married Frank. Just say what you have to say. We're not on small talk terms." "Grace, I've broken up. You'll always be my true love. We were each other's first. I know you can't let me go." Suddenly, he grabbed my hand. "We can secretly be together, take all of Frank's assets for ourselves." I stepped back. "Are you nuts? Stay away from me. You think you're even in the same league as Frank? You can't just be ungrateful. Meeting Frank was thanks to me. If not for me stepping in at that bar, you two wouldn't have met. I'm like Cupid in your story. I'll warn you, Charles, stay away or I'll tell Frank. It won't end well for you." Something I said must have triggered him. Suddenly, he lifted his shirt. His skin was a patchwork of bruises and scars. I was startled. Frank did all this. How can I not hate him? And most of all, it's because of you, you witch. Did you even sleep with him? You wouldn't for me, but you'd go with that jerk. Realizing his mood was off, I grabbed my bag, ready to leave. Suddenly, he grabbed me. "You bitch, if it weren't for you, I'd have been living it up with some rich beauty by now." "Charles, are you crazy? Calm down. I've been crazy, driven mad by you and Frank. If I can't hurt him, hurting you will suffice." Out of nowhere, he pulled a shiny, short knife and charged straight at me. "Go to hell, bitch." In a split second, I heard the sound of the knife piercing flesh. I turned at the sound, and blood seeped from the wound, staining the bottom of my jacket. Looking up, I saw Frank's pale face, but he smiled at me, his eyes bright. Frank. Frank lay in a hospital bed, his abdomen wrapped in thick bandages. I handed him a peeled orange. He didn't take it, just stared at me. "Feed me. Your injury is on your waist, not your hand." I put the orange in my mouth. "Take it or leave it." Frank tried to sit up, but it strained his wound. "What are you doing? Your wound isn't healed, you can't just move around." His expression was so innocent, yet he said with an aggrieved tone, "I just wanted to see if the orange was sweet." I was taken aback. "But I ate all the oranges." Frank chuckled softly, his voice low and slightly seductive. "Come closer, I have a way." I leaned in as directed, looking at him. "What way?" A strong hand gripped my waist, pulling me towards him. In the quiet room, hormones ran rampant. He held the back of my head and kissed me. Before I realized it, he gently licked my tongue. The sound of his breathing grew heavier in my ear and my grip on the bedsheets tightened. Just when I thought I might suffocate, it ended. As we parted, he lightly bit my tongue. "Tastes sweet." Feeling a bit weak, I saw Frank's face had a faint blush. I whispered, "Frank, are you seducing me? Isn't it obvious? How else can I use marriage to climb up?" I looked at him, reminding him of the past. "But you said you didn't like me. You told me not to overthink things, that we were only marrying for the child." It was a misunderstanding. We don't have feelings, so we could divorce. His eyes reddened, his tone cautious. No, let's not do that. His voice got softer. I like you, really like you. I just don't always express it right. I don't want to be apart from you. I later found out Charles deceived both of us. He not only lied to me but also to another woman he was seeing. She was this pretty, pampered heiress who had no idea she was the other woman in our relationship, kept in the dark by Charles. When the truth came out, thanks to Frank spreading the word, she was furious. After breaking up with Charles, she even cut off business ties with his company. So Charles bore a grudge against both me and Frank. Since he couldn't get to Frank, he targeted me. Ultimately, he ended up in jail for his actions. As the moonlight streamed through the window, casting shadows over us, I drew circles on Frank's chest. So, being a big boss means handling big crime bosses? You aren't some crime lord, right? Of course not. From the 20th century on, the family moved away from anything shady. We're all about supporting the government, cleaning up crime. I told you when we first met, wherever there's injustice, you'll find Frank. I giggled at his words. That's so corny. I remembered the first time I met Frank. It was before that night at the bar. Summer often rainy, but the drainage system wasn't great. Streets were always wet. While waiting for a ride, I saw an elderly woman with a cane fall into the water. People were ignoring her, as if she wasn't there. The dilemma of whether to help swirled in my mind. Before I could act, a guy in a sharp suit stepped out of a flashy pink Maserati, helping the woman up. He draped his own jacket over her shoulders and handed her his only umbrella, not caring that he was getting drenched. I sighed with relief. There are still good people in the world. The driver honked, signaling for me to get in. Before leaving, I glanced back one last time. The elderly woman had crossed the street, and the suited man slowly faded from view. Thinking back, I asked him, "You help a lot of people, don't you? Are you fond of playing hero?" He raised his hands in surrender. "I've helped them, sure, but never tried to take advantage." "I don't believe you. So why do you fancy me?" In a swift move, he flipped us over, pinning me beneath him. His voice deepened, "Because someone didn't play fair. She took my first kiss and stole my heart." I shoved him lightly. "Get off me, you're heavy." "I want to marry up." I pleaded. "No, you've used that excuse too many times." His hand rubbed circles on my waist. "But it never gets old, baby." Frank always said our relationship skipped a lot of steps. We hardly knew each other and jumped straight into marriage. I'd counter, "Are you saying we should divorce, redo everything from the start?" Whenever I said it, he would pout, "You still want to leave me, huh?" Ever since I left those divorce papers and ran off to the airport, he's held a grudge. Always scared I might really dump him one day. But I wouldn't. I only left because there was no other choice, and now that's all resolved. Frank explained everything about the box and what happened with Coco. The family had ties to the government, working to uproot black-on-black crime. The man in that box was a traitor, working with criminals, causing significant loss to the family, which is why Frank was so mad. Coco turned out to be Frank's cousin. He never paid those rumors any mind, never guessing they'd cause such a misunderstanding between us. He looked serious. "I've already cleared up these rumors. As for our marriage, I'm not gonna say anything without you saying something first. And besides, my love is right here, my heart is here, where else could I possibly go?" Frank stared at me intensely, his eyes shining. "Grace, say it again, I didn't catch that." "Didn't hear it? Well, never mind, maybe you'll get another chance, maybe you'll hear it then." I didn't expect Frank to really go through all the stages of romance. When our house filled up with all kinds of gifts and flowers every day, and Frank was all dressed up, like a peacock showing off, it finally hit me. What's up with you these days? Frank was stunned. "Didn't you notice I'm trying to win you over?" After hitting a wall with his pursuit, Frank continued to secretly create little surprises. I felt a bit bad about squashing his spirit when I saw how eager he looked. I was surprised he actually pulled something off. That beachside proposal shook the whole town. Golden sunlight setting, waves gently kissing the shore, surrounded by flowers, sparkling lights, balloons filling the sky, perfectly romantic night. But Frank was a little too forceful. After delivering his emotional proposal speech on one knee, I hesitated and didn't immediately offer my hand. He got up, took my hand, and slipped the ring on, a bit forcefully. With a plaintive look he said, "Why didn't you offer your hand?" I was just about to, but suddenly got a cramp. How could I have? I could only sweet-talk him, with the sunset or poetry, "You've long surpassed everything. There's only you in my eyes, nothing else." Epilogue. When Frank first broke through the obstacle, he and I both were stunned. A massive wave of joy swept over him, while I sank into deep confusion. Nothing had happened at the bar that night. Why didn't Frank mention it sooner? But as each wave hit, my thoughts were cut off. He held my hand, lost in a daze. The next day, I asked Frank what was up. "We didn't do anything that night. Why didn't you contradict me when I said I was pregnant?" Frank coughed awkwardly, looking away. It was a while before I heard his voice. "I thought the kid was Charles's." "Then why didn't you deny it wasn't yours? And you wanted to marry me? Are you stepping up to be a dad, Frank?" Seeing the tips of his ears turn red, realization dawned on me. I'd never been this close to another woman before. After rescuing her that night, I hadn't expected her to hug and cling to me like that. But I didn't hate it. When my team, as usual, wanted to send her to a safe place, I hesitated. I had selfish thoughts. I took her to a hotel, wanting to make sure she was safe first before leaving. I didn't expect her to be a bit tipsy and all touchy. I finally coaxed her to sleep and ended up dozing off too. The next morning she was already gone. But I couldn't just let it end like that. I proactively sought business with her company, but I never thought she'd be pregnant. She thought the baby was mine, and I was torn between sadness and joy. Sad that it was her ex-boyfriend's child. Joyful that she thought I was the father. After a long night of contemplation, I decided to marry her quickly. Why not see this as an opportunity? This child's secret will stay with me forever. I say it's mine, and it is mine. Turned out to be all a mistake, though. She was leaving behind divorce papers too. I refused to divorce, chased her to the airport. She really was only with me because of the baby. I was furious and started saying whatever. Fortunately, it all turned out perfectly in the end. Sunsets, goodbyes. Both are to be continued. But love goes on.